Did we get like a couple of pages into?
Woodman's
yeah.
line? Yes.
Okay. That's what I was hoping. So, I want to, because we're not going to finish it today because I'm going to get bogged down for a few minutes. We'll get within, hopefully, a couple pages of the end. So, I'm assuming we talked about the grandmother talking about the Misfit in the newspaper and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so I'm going to pick up with 363. So they're driving through Georgia, and John Wesley makes derogatory remarks about Georgia, and the grandmother tries to correct him and says, you know, you should speak nice about your town where you, or place where you grew up, etc. Middle of, just above the middle of 363. Did we talk about seeing the little black kid in the doorway? We did talk about it. Okay, I'm getting you guys confused with my first class. Okay, so skip all that, then go down to the bottom of 363. Yeah, second half. So they keep driving, and we're told in that paragraph just after the middle of the page, they passed a large cotton field with 5 or 6 graves fenced in the middle of it, like a small island. And the grandmother says, look at the graveyard. That was the old family burying ground. That belonged to the plantation. John Wesley asks, where's the plantation? And she jokes, it's gone with the wind, etc. Okay. How many graves? 5 or 6. How many people in the family? How many people are in the car? 6. This is a little bit of foreshadowing. Okay. So, they keep driving, and the grandmother tells them a story about when she was a young lady and such. And top of 364, they go to the tower for lunch, for barbecue. We see signs, or we're given what some signs read: try Red Sammy's famous barbecue, none like famous Red Sammy's, Red Sam the fat boy with the happy laugh, a veteran, Red Sammy's your man, etc., etc. So they pull into the barbecue, or into the tower, and Red Sam's underneath a truck, working on it. They go inside, sit down at a counter, and we see Red Sam's wife. She comes out, takes the order. She looks at June Starr, thinks, what a pretty little girl. Okay. Bailey's mother asks if he would like to dance with her because the Tennessee Waltz is playing, and Bailey glares at her. And Red Sam's wife says, just after the middle of the page, ain't she cute? Looking at June Starr. Would you like to come be my little girl? No, I certainly wouldn't. Wouldn't live in a broken down place like this for $1 million. Then she runs back to the table. Ever the sweet, delightful child. And she says again, ain't she cute? And the grandmother, berates her. Red Sam comes in. Okay. Sits down at a nearby table and says, you can't win. These days, you don't know who to trust. Ain't that the truth? Grandmother. People are certainly not nice like they used to be. Again, she harkens back, and we're going to hear this repeatedly. She harkens back to the good old days of how things were before. Now, we don't know exactly when those good old days were. We're never given an exact time frame, but it's before all the troubles of the current situation. Okay? So, Red Sam gives an example, or gives the justification for his statement that you can't win. 2 fellers come in here last week driving a Chrysler. Old beat up car, but it is a good one. These boys looked all right to me. Said they worked at the mill. I let them fellers charge the gas they bought. Now, why did I do that? So what does he mean when he says he let them charge the gas? They bought. He does not mean with one of these. How does he mean charge? He let them fill up on the promise that they would return and pay him. That's what he means. Okay? Why did he do that? Look at what he says. They said they worked at the mill, and they looked all right to me. Red Sam says, on the basis of how they appeared to him, and they told him they worked at the mill, he let them put some gas in the car. That's it. Okay? Why did I do that? The grandmother. Because you're a good man. Yes, and I suppose so. As if he were struck with the answer. So why does she say he's a good man? I know, the question seems silly because we just talked about it, right? Why does she say he's a good man? Let me rephrase that. What position, what situation, what circumstances were those two men in? They needed gas. Okay? If they didn't get gas, they couldn't keep going. They're stuck. Right? They're in a, to use a phrase Bailey's going to use later, a predicament. Not quite the same predicament as Bailey and the family will be in later, but it's still a predicament. I don't know if you've ever run out of gas in the middle of nowhere. My wife and I, one time we were driving back from California to Tennessee. We didn't run out of gas, but radiator hose blew. Literally middle of nowhere, Oklahoma. Midnight. I mean, we were on I-40, and there's not an exit sign to be seen. And over a few hundred yards away, there's a little farmhouse with a light on. Get out of the car and go over to the farmhouse, knock on the door. They called sheriff, whatever. They came, either duct tape or electrician's tape, I can't remember which, wrapped the hole till I could make it to, a gas station and fill up. Buy new radiators. Anyways, his wife brings the orders, and she says, so the grandmother says, because you're a good man. Red Sammy's kind of surprised. He says, yeah, I guess so. It is in a soul in this world of God's that you can trust. And I don't count nobody on that. She looks at her husband. Why the emphasis that she looks at her husband? What's the narrator telling us?
He might not be a good man.
Possibly. Or she doesn't think he's a good man. There's some tension in this marriage. This isn't, Adam and Eve and wedded bliss, before the fall and such. All right? What does she say? It is in a soul in this green world of God's that you can trust. And yet, what happened just previously in this story? Those men could trust Sam. Sam thought he could trust them. Notice, let me rephrase that. Sam trusts them. They don't live up to that trust, but he still trusts them. Okay? So, grandmother asks, did you read about that criminal? The Misfit. And Sam's wife goes on and on. I'm sure if he knows about this place, he's going to come here. And she says 3 times, wouldn't be none surprised. It's almost like she's going, please come. Take me away from Sam. That'll do. In other words, shut up, honey. So, Sam says the title of the story. A good man is hard to find. Okay? Now, I suggested the other day that the title of the story might harken back to the parable of the rich young ruler who comes to Jesus. Good master, what must I do to be saved? And Jesus says, why do you call me good? There's none good but God, blah, blah, blah. Okay? There might be another story that it's related to, however, which we'll get to in a moment. Sam says, a good man is hard to find. Everything is getting terrible. notice he doesn't say everything is terrible. Like the world is falling apart. He says it's getting that way. I remember the day you could go off and leave your screen door unlatched. Not no more. This is written and published in 1953. Probably written 52, maybe 51. What is meant when he says, I remember when you could leave your screen door unlatched? Give somebody paint the scene with words for me. What's he talking about?
A time where the world was safer, where you weren't worried about getting robbed, so you could just leave the door open or like unlocked.
Exactly. For a minute there, I was going to say, give me the actual image. This is the hard outside door. You could go outside, leave that door open, leave the screen door closed, but not with a latch on the inside. He says, I remember when you could leave the front door, leave the house, go to work, leave the house wide open, screen door closed. Why would you do that? No air conditioning. Keep that airflow. Shotgun house, possibly. You know what a shotgun house is? It's a long, narrow house, rooms off to the side, and you have an open breezeway from the front door to the back door. You open those doors with screens, and the air moves. It keeps it cooler, okay? So he's talking about when he could leave the door so that it's not even latched on the inside. Because if the door is latched on the inside, somebody wants to break in, what do they have to do? They have to break the screen door, okay? So he's saying, I remember when you could do that. Not now. Now, I've got to be really security conscious and put that little latch on the screen door. Okay? They discuss better times, better when. Whenever the golden age was. She blames all the problems of the current situation on Europe. She said, the way Europe acted, you would think we're made of money. Red Sam says, no use talking about it. Why? Because it's not going to stop anything. So why does she blame Europe?
World War II.
Keep going. Yes, World War II.
Cold War?
It's just really ramping up, but possibly there's a more specific reason. Anybody know what the United States did after World War II? We, not Germany, not Italy, not Japan, not England, not France. We, the United States, rebuilt Europe. We paid for it almost entirely with what's called the Marshall Plan, named after the Secretary of State, if I remember correctly, who said, yeah, I know they were our enemies, but if we rebuild, guess what? We make them our friends. Or more importantly, we put them in our debt. Why did Japan become such an economic powerhouse? One, they didn't have to defend themselves at all because we wouldn't allow them to have a defense. And two, we gave them a constitution, pretty much based on ours. And we gave them an economic system, which they didn't have before. Okay? Same thing with West Germany. It's how they became economic powerhouses and became more powerful in one sense, better economies than the United States had in the 60s and 70s and such. Okay? So, why does he say everything is getting terrible? Why not just say everything sucks? Everything is terrible. Because for Red Sammy, it's not the worst it can be. It can get worse. Okay? So, they leave. They drive off. And grandmother wakes up from a little nap. And she tells the kids, June Starr, John Wesley, about a plantation house she remembered visiting when she was a young lady. In this area, paragraph 45, page 365, outside the little town of Toomsboro. More foreshadowing. Okay? And she tells them this was a big house, 6 white columns out front, had a secret panel where the family kept its silver. And she says the road leading to it was just about a mile back. We could be there in 20 minutes. And the children start yelling and screaming, we gotta go, we gotta go, we gotta go. Okay? Bottom of the page, Bailey's driving, looking straight ahead. Notice his jaw rigid as a horseshoe. In other words, Bailey is like a spring ready to snap, which he does in a moment. No. Just no. The children began to yell and scream that they wanted to see the house with the secret panel. John Wesley kicks the back of the front seat. June Starr hangs over her mother's shoulder, whines into her ear. Notice we're never told that the mother says anything or does anything. They rant and rave. They never get to do what they want to do. The baby starts to scream. John Wesley's kicking the back of the seat so hard, Bailey feels it in his kidneys. And Bailey says, all right. Will you all just shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up. We'll go. But this is the only time we're going to do this. Foreshadowing. Yeah, it is the only time they're going to do it. What does this tell us about Bailey? As a parent? As a father?
No spine.
Louder?
No spine.
No spine.
No discipline.
He's the kind of father that if the kid whines and complains enough, I'm going to let you do this just this once. And then a couple days later, okay, we're going to let you do this one more time. What has the child learned? Who is teaching a lesson here? The child is teaching Bailey. Heel. Okay? So, they turn around. They go back down a dirt road. And the children are talking about, while you talk to the people, we'll sneak through the back window and we'll find. Okay? Bailey, if this place doesn't show up in a minute, I'm turning around. And the grandmother suddenly realizes, oops, house I'm thinking of, it's in Tennessee. You know, she's only off by a few hundred miles. Not bad. And when she realizes that, she's startled. She jumps. She knocks the suitcase off the basket that the cat is in. Pitty Sing jumps out, latches onto Bailey's neck, claws out. The children were thrown to the floor, and their mother, clutching the baby, was thrown out the door onto the ground. No seatbelt, right? The old lady was thrown into the front seat. The car turned over once, landed right side up in a gulch off the side of the road. Bailey remained in the driver's seat with the cat, gray striped, with a broad white face and an orange nose, clinging to his neck like a caterpillar. In other words, it's like wrapped around. Okay? So, here's the road they've been driving down, and you can see it for a distance. You know, it winds back off to the mountains and stuff. They flip over, and they end up down here. The car's up here. The mother's down here, so the family comes down here where the mother is. Reason the car's up here is because when the Misfit and the two boys come, they're going to fix the car so they can be driven off. If the car's down here, they can't drive it off. Drive it away, okay? So, what happens? As soon as the children realize they can move their arms and legs, in other words, they're not injured, they scream, we've had an accident. Grandmother's curled up under the dashboard, hoping she's injured. Why? Because then Bailey won't be as harsh on her. Bailey removed the cat from his neck with both hands and flung it out the window against the side of a pine tree. Why against the side of a pine tree? Why do we get that little detail? Okay, what happens to a cat? You think cat hits the trees, drops to the ground, lands on its paws, and runs away? No, I think the cat's broken its back. When he hits the cat against the tree, the cat probably just lies there and twitches a bit. Okay? Who didn't want the cat to come in the first place? He gets out of the car and starts looking for the children's mother. Why does O'Connor say, and I don't know that this is the reason, okay? I'm going to give a reason that's probably just me reading into it. I'll admit that right now. But why does O'Connor write, begins looking for the children's mother and not begins looking for his wife? What's the difference between the children's mother, his wife? Louder?
He doesn't really love her.
He doesn't want to take care of the children.
Or he doesn't want to take care of the children. It's a different relationship between his wife, children's mother. I've got 4 kids, they're all grown up now. I used to tell them when they were little, prepare them for the world with my kind of mentality. If anything happens, push comes to shove, I'm choosing mom, guys. Mom's more important than you are to me. And they're, I get real big and tell other people, like, how horrible, you shouldn't tell that, you're going to scar it. And it's like, you came from her. She was first. She's more important, Not to Bailey. I don't think. I think Bailey only sees Cabbage Face Woman, because she's never named, as children's mother. Doesn't see her as, first and foremost, wife, lover, kind of a thing. Could be wrong. Could be entirely wrong. So, he goes looking for her, which does tell us something. He wants to know how she is. I mean, it's not like he just merely sees her as baby producer, kind of a, whatever. And what are we told? She's sitting against the side of the red gutted ditch. Symbolism, okay, it is Georgia. Middle of Georgia, red clay. So it is red. But there's symbolism also. Holding the screaming baby, but she only had I love this only. She only has a cut down her face and a broken shoulder. I don't know if you've ever broken your shoulder. January of 2010, I stepped out my big garage door was open, to put a bag of trash in the trash can. I stepped out onto the driveway, knowing it had snowed and everything overnight. We had a pretty good snow and ice storm, but not thinking, not realizing. Where I'm going to step is where, when snow and ice on the roof melts, it comes down the downspout and then it flows across the driveway. And just underneath that little coating of snow was just a sheet of ice. And I stepped and it was like an old cartoon where somebody steps on a banana peel. And whoosh, feet up, I broke my fall with this arm like this and severed every tendon in this shoulder. Total rotator cuff tear. So my arm was literally like this. Got to the ER. I need you to raise your arm up on here so we can. And I'm like, you don't understand. First of all, I'm about to pass out from the pain. I can't raise it. I can do this, but otherwise it just hangs, kind of thing. Pain. Worse pain than when I was on fire when I was 6 years old. I mean, bad pain. Okay? So she only has a cut and a broken arm, broken shoulder. June Starr looks at grandmother as she gets out of the car, but nobody's killed. Why? Why does June Starr say that? Okay. One, literally is true. Why else?
He wishes that grandma had died.
Louder?
He wishes that grandma
Yes.
had died.
Damn. Grandma's still alive. Like, maybe, praise Jesus, we're finally free of the old bat, But nope. Listen to O'Connor read the story. She reads that part, and it's just like, sticks that knife in and slowly twists it. The irony there, okay? As the grandmother adjusts her hat with the brim, and then the brim just falls off. Now, I think there's a lot going on there. Why does she adjust her hat? Why is she wearing the hat in the first place? Why does she dress the way she does the morning they get on this they begin this road trip. So that people will know if there's an accident and she's found on the side of the road, that she's a lady. What does the crumbling brim on her hat suggest? This is a fiction. She's not as much of a lady as she says she is. Okay? So, the mother, the children's mother says, maybe a car will come along. Hoarsely. Why hoarsely? Pain. She can barely get the words out. Okay? We get a description of what Bailey's wearing, and then we're told the road's about 10 feet above. Off to this side are trees. Off to this side is the red dirt of the gulch. And they can see off in the distance where the road goes over a hill. They can see this car slowly approach. Comes to a stop just over them. 3 men in it. Paragraph 70, top of 367, last penultimate sentence. Second to last sentence. It was a big, black, battered, what? Hearse-like automobile. What's a hearse? It's where you carry the dead. You put somebody in a coffin, you go from to the funeral home, the place that has prepared the body, to the cemetery to put the body in the grave. It's a vehicle that carries the dead. Or another way of looking at it, it can bring death. Okay? 3 men in it, they get out. We get a description of them. The driver is the oldest of them. He has graying hair. He's not wearing a shirt. The other 2 are. They all 3 have guns. Okay? The grandmother looks at him and she has a peculiar feeling. I recognize him, but she doesn't say anything. He says, good afternoon. See, you all had a little spill. We turned over twice, grandmother says. Once, we saw it. We seen it happen. Try their car and see will it run, Hiram? John Wesley, wonderful, beautiful little child. What you got that gun for? What you gonna do with that gun? Lady, would you mind calling them children to sit down by you? Children make me nervous. You don't want somebody with a gun to be nervous, right? I want you all to sit down right together where you're at. Jude Starr, what you telling us what to do for? It's because he has the gun. Bailey, look here now. We're in a predicament. Who's the we? Is it the family plus the 3? No. Because the Misfit and his accomplices, they're not in any predicament. They've got the firepower. And that's when the grandmother says, you're the Misfit. And Bailey's like, Ma, would you shut and put out your string of expletives, F and whatever. Yes'm. He smiles. Would have been better for all of you, lady, if you hadn't have recognized me. Why? Because now I've got to kill you. Because if I let you go, you're going to tell the authorities where you saw me. Bailey turns, swears at his mother. She starts crying. The Misfit says, he didn't mean that. I didn't reckon he meant to talk to you that way. You wouldn't shoot a lady, would you? Yeah. Who's she talking about? Herself. Why doesn't she say who of that family is the quote unquote most innocent? The baby. You wouldn't kill a baby, would you? Or the mother holding the baby? Come on. And he's like, no, I'd hate to. I'd hate to have to kill a lady. She's only concerned about herself. Or you wouldn't kill these wonderful children. And he's probably thinking, no, I'm going to take pleasure in killing those 2 wonderful children. I know you're a good man. She said Red Sam was a good man. And she's saying, this guy is a good man. What does she mean by the word good? Because she seems to mean different things in different situations. What did she mean about Red Sam? You were generous. You were nice to those guys who needed help. You gave help. Here, what does she mean by good?
I know you can make good decisions.
I know, or she says, you don't look a bit like you have common blood. I know you must come from nice people. What does she mean by common blood and nice people? You're not low class. You're not related to Abner Snopes. She's saying you come from a respectable part of society. Common blood is down here, poor, low socioeconomic status. Okay? You're not like that, are you? That's not what she meant when she said to Red Sam, you're a good man. How do you know? Because Red Sam comes in also without a shirt on, and he's wiping the sweat and grime off of him. Most people would say, a lot of people would say, he looks, what? Kind of lower class. And yet he helps the others. There's another parable by Jesus, and it's about being good to others. Anybody know which one I'm thinking of? Do I have it written down? The Good Samaritan. Why is the parable called the Good Samaritan parable? What was it about Samaritans in Jewish society that made Jesus choose a Samaritan to be the neighbor to the other? They were rejected. They were the lowest of the low. They were the commonest of the common. Why? They weren't pure Jews. They were mixed race, mixed blood. Samaria was not a Jewish area. Okay? So, 3 Jews come down the road. They see the poor guy beaten up, bleeding on the road, and they all ignore him. The Samaritan comes by, and he picks the guy up. He binds his wounds, put him on his donkey, takes him to the nearest hotel, puts him up for the night, tells the innkeeper, I'll pay all the charges. In other words, the person you least expect to be good is the one who is good. Okay? And here she is calling the misfit, who she knows what about. He's a killer. He's not just a single killer. He's killed multiple people. Okay? And he says, yes, I'm finest people in the world. God never made a finer woman than my mother. My daddy's heart was pure gold. And he tells Bobby Lee, watch him, children. You know they make me nervous. And he looks up. Don't see no sun. No clouds neither. So if he doesn't see any sun and he doesn't see the clouds, what does he see? I didn't mention this in my first class. I will on Wednesday. What color? Blue. You're down in a ditch. You look up and you see blue. This is symbolic. We'll get to what it symbolizes probably on Wednesday. So, she said, yeah, it's a beautiful day. Really? Not for them, it's not. You shouldn't call yourself the misfit. I know you're a good man. I can just look at you and tell. Well, that's what Red Sam thought too, right? I looked at those fellers and I thought, they look all right to me. They didn't shoot them. They didn't steal from them. Bailey, hush. Everybody shut up. Let me handle this. And he's squatting in the position of a runner, getting ready to take off out of the blocks. Why? Is Bailey going to grab his wife and baby? Nope. He's going to save himself. Like mother, like son. Appreciate that, lady. Hiram says it'll take half hour to fix the car. So he said, well, before you do that, you and Bobby Lee, you go get him and that boy. Walk off to them woods. The boys want to ask you something. Would you mind stepping back in them woods? We're in a terrible predicament, Bailey says. Nobody realizes what this is, and his voice cracks. Bailey does. What's he know the predicament is? I got about 45 seconds to live. Okay? The real predicament, however, is something even greater. So I'm going to pause here to talk about this stuff and relate it to the terribleness that the world is getting to. So this story is set early 1950s. Let's back up. End of the 19th century was called looking to the beginning of the 20th century. They were thinking, Western world, Western intelligentsia, looked at the 20th century as being the beginning of a new era. Right? For one reason, it's the ending 100 years of a millennium. Even, same idea happened at the beginning of the 21st century, the 2000s, right? And a couple of important publications started being published at the very end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th century. One was a magazine called The Christian Century, because the people behind it thought the next century would be the Christian century, when everybody would be Christian in deed, if not in name. Because Christian didn't mean to be a follower of Jesus, it meant to be a follower of what Jesus taught. Just be nice to everybody. Help everybody out. Be the Good Samaritan. Okay? And it was thought, literally by many, that by the end of the 20th century, okay, we would reach kind of heaven on earth, where war would end, poverty would be overcome, there'd be no famine, there'd be no drought, everybody, would be happy and wonderful. It was also called the progressive century. Not only in the political sense progressive, because modern progressives think, oh, we're new. No, they're not. The idea goes back over 100 years. Progressive in the sense of humanity would continue to progress along the evolutionary scale. We would live longer and longer lives. We do. And our lives would be more and more wonderful and beautiful and great, and etc. We don't. That second part. All right? And yet what happens? Within the first decade and a half, World War I. What's it also called? Two other names for it. The Great War. Why? Because there'd never been a war like this in the world before. And at the end of it, the war to end all wars, it was thought. And yet the way the war was ended creates the seeds for World War II. Not called the Second Great War, or the next Great War, or really we mean it now, the war to end all wars, because that one ends, and what happens within the next 5 years? The Korean War. Oh, let's be accurate, conflict, because it wasn't really a war, supposedly, which we're still in, by the way. The war is not ended, there is merely a ceasefire. Okay? And then within 10 years of that, Vietnam, etc. Not the progressive Christian century at all. Okay? Simultaneously with the beginning of this, a little bit before, you had Friedrich Nietzsche, German philosopher, who wrote a lot, but he promulgated some ideas that Hitler really loved. Okay? One of those ideas, he was the first person who said, supposedly at least, God is dead. And Nietzsche said, God is dead and we have killed him. And then he goes on and says, and therefore everything is permissible. if there's no God who's going to kind of keep us in control with the carrot and the stick, carrot, future happiness and blessing and joy, stick, hell, okay? If there's none of that over us, then what's to stop me from doing what I want? Nothing, all right? He also is the founder, so to speak, not that he literally said, I'm going to start the school of philosophy. Not in that sense. He's the founder of the school branch of philosophy called Nihilism. Notice the root of that. What word do we have in modern English that relates to that? Annihilate. Annihilation. What do you do when you annihilate somebody? Sorry, something. Let's not be violent. You totally destroy them or it. Okay? So, nihil, nothing. It's the philosophy of nothingness. What do I mean by that? Nothing has any meaning. Nothing. There is no meaning to life. There's absolutely zilch reason for my being, for your being, meaning existing. There's no reason for anything to be here. It doesn't mean anything. Quit trying to think it means something. Love is meaningless. It's just a chemical reaction in the body. Period. And then you die. That puts a smiley face on you, doesn't it? Makes you want to get up every morning and just go on. No. Every person, I had an uncle who did this, every person who commits suicide, at the moment they pull the trigger, pop the pills, slit the wrist, inject the whatever, they're a nihilist. Because a nihilist not only says there's no meaning to life, but then they go one step farther. And if there's no meaning to life, there's no reason to go on living. Okay? I mean, why? As Hamlet says in his famous not soliloquy, because it's not a soliloquy actually, his to be or not to be speech, why would you suffer all this stuff? Slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. Hamlet says the only reason I do is because I'm going to die and I'm going to go to that country from whose bourne no one returns and I might meet God. He doesn't say he will meet God. He says I might, essentially. According to nihilism, there is no God. There's nothing else there. This is it. You die. That's it. You dissolve. There is no you anymore. Okay? Positive idea, right? Well, part of what's in this is Nietzsche's little book. It's not little, it's a big thick thing. Beyond Good and Evil. That is, beyond standard ideas of morality. All right? Nietzsche says, J.K. Rowling steals from him, for the end of the first Harry Potter book, there is no such thing as good and evil. There is only power. All right? Power is everything. So, Nietzsche said you have to have a will to power. You have to grab what you want out of life. Hitler loved this. Why? Because it also, I mentioned Dostoevsky the other day, his book, Crime and Punishment. Nietzsche also simultaneously comes up with the same idea of the Superman, the person who is not bound by everyday morality, good and evil. This person creates his or her own good and evil, all right? Two other names, actually three. Kind of coming out of nihilism, but modifying it and softening a bit, is the branch of philosophy called existentialism, or maybe not coming out of it, related to it. Existentialism. Existentialism also essentially says, Jean-Paul Sartre is one of the main proponents of that. Albert Camus, there's a ton of them. Also, these are both secular existentialists. Okay? Existentialists also said there is no meaning to life. Ultimately, this is all there is, we are all there is, and then you die, and that's it. But they both said you can create meaning for your life. You can make your meaning. You can make your existence have purpose. How do you do that? You validate or authenticate your life. What? You make your life valid. How do you do that? So that other people know you lived or live. How do I make it so other people know I was here? Well, in one sense you could say I'm doing it now. I've been doing it for 30 years. Because there's a lot of people who've been in your seats who go, I'll never forget, whatever, okay? You can do it a good way, you can do it a bad way. You can be Mother Teresa and open soup kitchens and help the poor and the downcast and the outcast, the literal nothings in Calcutta, right? Because you can be darn sure the people she helped remember her nearly 20 years after her death, over 20 years after her death, or you can be Hitler. Because you can be sure people are going to be referring to Hitler, assuming we're all still here, 1,000 years from now. How do you know? Because we still talk about Genghis Khan. Not been dead 1,000 years, but it's close. We still talk about Julius Caesar. Real person, did good stuff, did bad stuff, etc. People know they existed. How do you make a puny little unimportant me? How do I make sure people know I could do a variety of things? You could be like the two Columbine shooters, because they wanted to make sure people knew who they were. That's why they shot up the school and left behind their little manifestos. Okay? Notice, no morality is involved. It doesn't have to be a good thing or a bad thing. You just make sure you leave your mark on the world. Okay? One other person, Søren Kierkegaard, a Danish philosopher theologian. A little bit before these two, he came up with kind of a Christian form of this existentialism. And it was just that you live moment by moment, and you do that by faith, like Abraham. By faith, we're told in the book of Hebrews, Abraham offered up Isaac. Notice in that Old Testament story, God promised everything to Abraham would come through Isaac. And then he says, oh, by the way, go sacrifice him. Go kill your son. And he's like, okay, God, but you promised. Okay? He's faith kind of a thing. All right? So why do I get in all this predicament? Because in the early 1950s, this is the dominant philosophical worldview. Why? World War I, Great Depression, the Holocaust, World War II. What's the world gone through? Audie Murphy, famous U.S. soldier, wrote his autobiography called To Hell and Back. He was the most widely decorated soldier in World War II. Okay? And it was about all the stuff he'd been through. Okay? Because we were in the midst of being through hell and back. And this philosophy was dominant. You just got to let everybody know you exist. What are we told early on about what the Misfit does? Why is there an article about him in the Atlanta Constitution and Journal? Not only because he's a murderer, he does what? Serial killers do this today still. Gives himself a name, signs. He's dead. I grew up 25 miles away from the Zodiac killer. I literally remember going to bed at night, afraid this guy was going to break into my bedroom window. Okay? I grew up for about 3 or 4 years with one of California's most notorious serial murderers 4 doors down. Didn't know it at the time. Didn't know it until I was like 20, 21. And we're like, really? I'll tell you a story about him later. Okay? So, that's the terrible predicament. Notice, that's broader than just their specific predicament. Okay? So, Bobby Lee and Hiram take Bailey and John Wesley off to the woods. And the Misfit and the grandmother have a conversation while they're going. Bailey goes off and he turns around, stops at a tree, turns around and yells, "I'll be back in a minute, Mama. Wait on me." Who's the mama? Who's he referring to? His mother? The children's grandmother? Or is this like, you sometimes would see in older generations, like 2 generations earlier than me, where a husband would refer to his wife as mother because she's the mother of his children. Okay? Is it that? I don't think it's that. I think it's screw the wife. "Mama, wait for me." And she says, "Baby boy." And then she talks to the Misfit again. I think Bailey's a mama's boy. She's lived with him. He moves away, gets married, and she moves in. He's the only child, and she's, I think, and I think the story implies this, done what ever since then? "Baby boy, just you listen to me." And day in and day out. She so beat him down. He doesn't have a spine to stand up to her. Okay? So she says, "I know you're a good man. You're not a bit common." And he says, "Nope, I'm not. But I'm not the worst in the world either." Right? Because they just saw seemingly the worst in the world with Hitler. I mean, you want to belittle someone today, politically. Both sides do it. All sides do it. What do? You equate your opponent with Nazis. You don't like him? He's a Nazi. It doesn't matter. The person's as opposite as the Nazis can be. Okay? So he goes on and he talks about his daddy. What his daddy used to say about him. Okay? And then she says, "Do you ever pray?" Just after paragraph 105. "Do you ever pray?" He says, "No." She cries out, "Bailey boy." He goes on, talks about, I was a gospel singer for a while. Just goes to show you, just because you can sing gospel doesn't mean you're not going to become a murderer. Okay? And he talks about all the things he's seen and done, and she's going, "Pray, pray, pray, pray." Is she telling him to pray? No. She's telling herself, pray. Why? Rather than doing what? Praying. She's not actually praying. She's telling herself, I need to pray. Okay? And he talks about being buried alive. She goes, "Well, that's when you should have started to pray." What does he mean? He wasn't literally buried alive. Buried alive was when he was sent to prison. Wall here, wall here, wall here, wall here, wall there, wall there. He was in a box. This is the classic example of existential angst. Because existentialism ultimately taught we are all, each of us, totally isolated from everybody else. And you can never break out of that isolation. You are totally 100% alienated. It's why, in the late 60s, early 70s, Ma Bell came up with an advertising campaign. Old dial phones. Reach out and, anybody know how it goes? Touch someone. Through the telephone. Touch someone. Connect. Only thing is, when you're on your telephone, are you connecting? The word connecting literally means with touching. Contact. Okay? What's the extrapolation from this to today? Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, social media. Media has 2 meanings. It can be the means by which information is passed, etc. But it also, because of that, it implies there's something between. Right? It's the in-between. So how can you have social media? If I use this to contact somebody, I'm not literally contacting. Existentialism says, because you can't. No matter what you do or try, you will never get through. And notice we're back to the minister's black veil. And what does the minister see on his deathbed? Lo, around me a black veil on every face. Because everyone separates themselves. Okay, we'll stop there. We'll pick up bottom of 369 on Wednesday. For Wednesday, though, read what's assigned in the syllabus, the intro to drama stuff, and you don't have to read all of it for Wednesday, but get into Oedipus the King. Because we'll get into Oedipus the King after, well, I'm going to say 10 minutes. It'll probably be more like 40 minutes of finishing this. Quiz, there's a quiz posted to do Wednesday night, 11:59. It's over minister's black veil, barn burning, and fiction terms. Read the little introduction